Here we are again, folks. Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. You say, Brother Peter, you spent a lot of time in the Old Testament. The writings of the Old Testament are the same writings in the New Testament, rewritten in a language of faith in the New Testament, and they're written under a language of law in the Old Testament. But the New Testament is a revamping of the Old Testament by faith in a different light. The same things that happened in the Old Testament could happen in the New Testament, but they happen as metaphorically in a sense. They're not metaphors, yet they appear to be. What it talks about a river flowing in the Old Testament. Sometimes the New Testament, the river that flows is faith. And the river that flows is love and peace and gentleness and meekness and contentment, and that's like a river flowing, a good river flowing of words there that are the same as perhaps a good river in the Old Testament. I have a pictorial of the Euphrates River, which flowed from way up in the country all the way down to Egypt, all the way down through. Was a vital river to have. It was more important to have that water than one would know. Without it, there would be desolation in all those areas. They would be desert-like places. But with that river flowing through, they were able to have what they needed in the Old Testament days. Well, we have a river, the river of faith, which flows from the God above, that flows from Jesus Christ, that was talked about way back in Genesis when Abraham prayed in Genesis 15:2, prayed for a son. God gave him one. And when Isaac prayed, that's the son that God gave Abraham. When Isaac prayed in Genesis 2:5-21, he was given what he needed. And then Rachel prayed in Genesis 30:1-22. God gave her and answered her prayer. And then we have Hannah's prayer in 1 Samuel. God gave her an answer to her prayer. And so all of the prayers we see noted in the Bible that were answered and for children, those were prayers directly for children. Zechariah's prayer in Luke was to see that Jesus Christ was born, to see that birth, and to have it. And Zechariah and Elizabeth were given a child, John the Baptist. And but we see back in the Old Testament that Rebekah gave birth to twin boys, Esau and Jacob. And they were brought forth as men that God would use to give us a picture of the New Testament. And that's one thing we need. We needed a picture of the New Testament from the Old Testament. And see, Abimelech discovers the truth. Isaac did the same thing that Abraham did. When he went to a country, he explained that this woman that he was married to was kin to him instead of being his wife, and caused great grief, and continually was a problem in that family, repeating the sin of the fathers. The son repeated the sin of the fathers, and it caused great problem. We see here that some that abided alongside of the Philistines, and they were in a different land, when trouble came to their land, they moved over into the Philistine land and acted like the Philistines did, and got away from the Abrahamic covenant. But God protected them anyway and dealt with them. We had Spurgeon wrote in one of the things in this Bible that I have that was written by an Arab, Salem Kerbin, he does a lot of writing in the bottom of his Bible of what C.H. Spurgeon, the old preacher of old times, said. It said, think of the identity and the glorious Jehovah acting as a guide to the blind. Jehovah God is a guide to those that are spiritually blind. He opens their eyes. What boundless condition does this imply? A blind man cannot find a way which he does not know. If a blind man is in a place that he knows, he's frequent with it, and he's able to walk in it, it's not a problem to him. He can do it very, very easily. But if you take that same blind man out of his area that he's in all the time and put him in an area where he doesn't know it, it's almost impossible for him to find his way around. Our preacher was talking about a friend of ours who was blind the other day, that in the area where he lives all the time, he can walk freely, just walk around like it was nothing, because he knows his side steps and his forward steps, and he knows where he is. And but you take him out of that location, put him somewhere else, he's got problems. And so what blindness can do for you, a way which it does not know, even when he knows the road, it is hard for him to traverse it. Even though being blind, he knows the road, still hard for him to traverse it. Listen, blindness is not where we're supposed to abide. We're supposed to abide in spiritual sightedness. How do we do that? We stay in the Bible. We stay in the Bible. And I've been studying here for a period of time about the prayers of some men and in the Old Testament, and how Isaac prayed, and Abimelech, and the Abrahamic covenant to Isaac was the blessing to him as long as he stayed in it. Now, salvation to you and I is permanent, and as long as we stay in it, we have a good, prosperous life. But if we get out into the desert areas or outside of where the river's flowing, outside of God, and try to do it on our own, we have a problem. It causes us to be in a place where we're not supposed to be. Do you know that when the Christians back in the Bible day went to where the Palestinians were, from where they were supposed to be, the Palestinians soon became jealous. And they didn't like the fact that these Jewish guys had come over there and God had blessed them even in Palestine, even in a bad place, the place they weren't to be. And God blessed them. And they got jealous and wanted to run them out of there. Now, they got mad at Abraham, and they filled some of the wells with dirt. That the forefathers had dug these wells, and these were good wells, and they filled them up with dirt. And those desert wells were filled with dirt because they were jealous. But Abraham and Isaac spent a great deal of time cleaning the debris out of those wells. Now, at the same time they're working cleaning the debris out of the wells, they're working cleaning the debris out of the physical life, out of the spiritual life. The dirt in the well was physical, but they had spiritual problems, and they were working on those. And as we are left in this world today with Jesus Christ as our Savior, we're in a tough world, and we need to work out our spiritual problems so that those that are living only by physical and only by what the devil provides them can see there is a spiritual side in you and I, and we work it out by following the Bible and what the Bible says. A young minister of God can really derive some profitable stuff in the lessons and the verses throughout the history of spiritual forefathers who had with patience and pleasure dug down deep into the Word of God and beautifully exposed those clear, fresh, cold water wells of the virgin birth and the sinless life of Christ. This book is a well of spiritual water. If we dig down in it and go back into it and dig out what it says, we will have the answer for the spiritual life. Isaac was a submissive son to his daddy, Abraham. You and I are supposed to be submissive to God. When Abraham prayed for Isaac a wife, he didn't pray to the world. He didn't go to the world. He went to his own people. He sent to his own people, people who were after God's own heart, to get him a wife. And Rebecca came from that stock. And that's important for you and I. If you're a Christian and you're in the church, don't go down to the bar room to find you a wife. Get one out of the church. Especially if you got praying parents. You got people in the church, your parents praying for you and everything. Don't break away from what God has for you to find something. I would love to have. It would matter not to me if my wife had a wart on the end of her nose that couldn't be removed. As long as she's that lovely woman she is. I would rather have a woman with a wart on the end of her nose than a woman I couldn't trust. And so we got to be careful that we get people from our own that are saved too. You can't join yourself to the world. Can salt water and fresh water flow from the same faucet? No. So you got to be careful. In Genesis, we find that what some of the people's father did in failing, that the person themselves, the child, did too. So we need to be careful now to stay in the will of God for ourselves and do right. And we need to be a willing worker. In Genesis 26, 17 through 33 was where those Palestinians got upset because God was blessing right in front of them, Abraham and them. So they made it where Abraham and his son had to stop and actually physically work, digging those wells out. And then we see at 97, Isaac feels his death is near. And Esau is instructed to prepare him a meal and receive the patriarchal blessing. But we know that he didn't get it, that his brother got it. Rebekah arranges to deceive the dim-eyed Isaac by substituting Jacob. Jacob receives the blessing intended for Esau. Isaac sends Jacob away that his son might escape Esau's revenge. Because later on they meet. God blessed both of them. He blessed both sides. They were his children. They were God's children, even though they got separated from each other for a while. And God blessed both of them. And when they came later on in life and met, they both had more than either one of them could deal with. They had a full house, full everything. God had blessed both of them, even though they were on two different roads of life. we're on different roads of life as Christians. But God blesses us in different ways. It's like if we spoke two different languages, we were in two different countries. I have missionary friends in the Philippines who do the same thing I do. They win souls. They preach and they teach and they talk to people and they go out daily and they run a school and they do all kinds of things, same things we do, only they do it in a different language. But it all comes down to the same thing. Isaiah 43, I just got done studying this, and let's look at something that Spurgeon says about bringing the blind to sight. What kind of blind person can get sight? A person that is spiritually blind can get perfect sight, spiritual sight, by following God, by asking God to forgive him of his sin. Think of the infinity, the glorious Jehovah acting as a guide to the blind. That's God acting as a guide. For me, I was a blind man walking in alcohol, drunkenness, and all of that. And God came along and took me out of that. He put boundless conditions out for me. There's no boundary to where I could go spiritually if I stay in the Word and do it. And this implies that the blind cannot find a way which he does not know. And when I was blind and did not know, I did everything in the physical trying to relate it to what was proper, and it wasn't. It was the opposite. Even when I knew the road, it was hard for me to traverse it, but a road which has not known is if you don't know the road. I remember one time we were going to Maine. We were leaving Georgia and we're driving to Maine, or vice versa. We were coming from Maine to Georgia, and I'm bad as a man about not asking for information. And I got off the road to get gas. I had to have gas. I was about out of gas, and we were in New York State. So I pull off the exit in New York State, and there's no entrance back on the highway. You can't get back on. When you get off that one, you're off. And you can't get back on the interstate there. So I get gas, and I proceed down that same highway, feeling that I was following along the same route that the interstate was going over there where I was. And we drove for hours and hours in this country. In New York, we got to see a lot of the state and everything, and drove and drove and drove. Well, it just so happened that after my wife chomping at the bit finally said, "You got to turn around. You have drove 40 miles. You've got to turn around." I said, "Babe, I'm not driving back. I'm going forward. We'll find the interstate up here." Sure enough, there it was, an entrance to it. See, that was back before you had telephones and stuff where you could do that. So we drove right onto the interstate and took off. And that's how pleasant that thing turned out. That's how pleasant it turns out for Christians who follow God. They might look like they're in the wilderness. They might look like they're not going to come out where they're supposed to come out. But eventually, if you keep on keeping on, you'll come out where you're supposed to come out. And that's the way God works. He said, "Fear not, I am with thee. I will bring thee thy seed from the east and gather thee from the west. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons from far, and my daughters from the ends of the earth, even every one that is called by my name, for I have created him for my glory. I have formed him, yea, I have made him." Jesus is going to come say one day, "Come up hither, ye saints. Come up hither." And he's going to call us home. And when he does, we're all going to go up to heaven with him. Bring forth the blind people. that have eyes, and the deaf that have ears. Let all the nations be gathered together, and let the people be assembled. Who among them can declare this, and show us former things? Let them bring forth their witness, that they may be justified, or let them hear and say it is truth. This is talking about the rapture of the church is going to go, and then a group of people are going to be gathered into the millennium reign. This is 1,000-year reign that's coming on the earth. In chapter 43 of Isaiah, it's talking about the 1,000-year reign. Listen to this. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness, and the rivers in the desert. The beasts of the field shall honor me, the dragons and the owls, because I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert, to give drink to my people, my chosen. This people have I formed for myself. They shall show forth my praise. What God's saying is he put that river in that desert for his people. Yes, the animals could enjoy it too, but it was put there for his people. And he made a river of salvation for people of this earth who will accept it, who will say, Jesus, I am a sinner. Forgive me of my sin. Come in my heart and save my soul. Can be on that river of salvation in this lost and dying world today. This is a tough world we live in today. Do you not know, though, that back in the day of the Israelite children, there was a tough world to live in, just like today? But God provided them a way out. He allowed them to use the same river that evil people were using to get good out of it and whatnot. But thou hast not called upon me, O Jacob, but thou hast been weary of me, O Israel. He's talking to two people that were his people. Jacob was his person, and Israel, the nation of Israel, were his people, and they stopped calling on him. I'm afraid we're living in a day today of little or no prayer, calling on the Lord. I fail myself in that area. So we need to get back into the house of prayer and find out. Well, we're going to call this a day right here on this one because we're at the end of it, and I don't want to start another excerpt right now. So we're going to say, if you haven't said, Jesus, I'm a sinner, forgive me of my sin, come in my heart and save my soul, you need to do that. Make sure that you got it signed, sealed, and delivered, and you know for a fact you're going to heaven. We'll see you next time. Right. Bye-bye.